This morning, President Obama goes out and says, hey, you know what? I got a new idea. How about we end the tax cuts for the rich? Now, I say there's a new idea because he, of course, had 4 years to do so and did not do so. But, hey, you know what? If he means it this time, that would be lovely. Now, I'm a little skeptical, as you can tell. Having said that, how is the politics of this? Well, finally, we've got a home run. He came out and he hit every point he should have hit. And I'm wondering, where the hell were these Democrats for the last 4 years, for the last 10 years, for the last 30 years? Here's a president being incredibly effective in making progressive points of view. Let's watch.
Many members of the other party believe that prosperity comes from the top down, so that if we spend trillions more on tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, that will somehow unleash jobs and economic growth. I disagree. I think they're wrong. I believe our prosperity has always come from an economy that's built on a strong and growing middle class.
There you go. Say, I'm here for the middle class. Those guys think it's going to trickle down on you. It hasn't worked. The whole country believes that, understands that already. Go home and make that point. I like it. Point number two, he's using the bully pulpit, literally. Here he is at the White House, and he says, I'm going to do a very important speech. All the press has to cover it. They do. All the major cable news, etc. It's at the White House. What's he going to do? It's not a stump speech. It's a new proposal. The new proposal is the same as the old proposal. But that's how you play politics if you're president. You say, hey, you know what? I'm sticking to my guns. And by the way, that actually is news when President Obama actually sticks to his guns. Perhaps that's why everybody covered it. Anyway, saying, no, I'm not budging. It's going to be tax cuts for people making under $250,000. And if you're making above that, you're not getting another round of tax cuts, at least for a year. That is the new policy proposal, if you can call it new. By the way, one last note on the optics of this. He had men and women behind him in this basically incredibly large photo op. He had a friendly crowd that was applauding. He didn't take questions from the press. And of the men and women, 6 of the people that were surrounding him were all women. We had whites, we had blacks, we had Latinos. The 2 people framed in the picture, as you can tell throughout these clips, mainly a woman on what appears to be our left, it must be his right, obviously, who looks like the most average American person you've ever seen in your entire life, and that's a compliment, not a bad thing. And then you have a Latina in the picture. I mean, this is how you play politics. Finally, they have figured it out, but the substance is even more important. Let's keep going.
I've cut middle-class taxes every year that I've been president by $3,600 for the typical middle-class family. Let me repeat, since I've been in office, we've cut taxes for the typical middle-class family by $3,600. I wanted to repeat that because sometimes there's a little misinformation out there, and folks get confused about it.
There you go. But that's exactly what you have to do. Because if you whisper it, they come out on Fox News, pretend otherwise, and your message gets drowned out. He said, let me repeat that for goddamn clarity, okay? I have cut taxes on the middle class. That is a fact, and you must print that because it's true. I like it. This is how you do it. Keep it going.
At the beginning of the last decade, Congress passed trillions of dollars in tax cuts that benefited the wealthiest Americans more than anybody else. And we were told that it would lead to more jobs and higher incomes for everybody, and that prosperity would start at the top, but then trickle down. And what happened? The wealthy got wealthier, but most Americans struggled. And in just a few years, we went from record surpluses under Bill Clinton to record deficits that we are now still struggling to pay off today. So we don't need more top-down economics. We've tried that theory. We've seen what happens. We can't afford to go back to it.
That is exactly right, okay? And about damn time Democrats said, hey, listen, we just tried that for the last 10 years. It didn't work. We've tried that for the last 30 years, and overall it didn't work. When we raise taxes, actually, all the economic indicators go up, not down. When we lower taxes for the rich, things don't get better, they get worse. In fact, let me show you some of the numbers. Today's top tax rate is, as you can see, much lower than it has been on average since 1945. Now, there was a brief period where it was at 28%. It was obviously slightly lower, but outside of that, it is the lowest it's been since that brief moment. And as you can tell, they were much, much higher before. And then when it comes to capital gains tax rates, well, that's also at a record low. So we are not overtaxed. It's almost the exact opposite in terms of historical lows. Now, you might say, well, that's a problem because I hear the tax cuts actually create a better economy. Well, that's, again, not true. So let's take a look at the different tax rates that we've had since 1950 and look at the effect on our GDP. That's our gross domestic product, and it shows you a sense of how they did. Well, when it was at 28 to 31, which was the lowest ever under Reagan, okay, well, a little below average. At 35, oh, look at that. That's where we are today. The very worst growth we have had since the 1950s. What's the highest? When the highest marginal tax rate was at 75 to 80%. In fact, when the highest marginal tax rate was at 90%, we did much better as an economy overall. Remember, the whole point of trickle down is, my God, if we just cut taxes on the rich, it's going to help the economy. But that's not true. When tax on the rich was at 90%, we had much better results overall for the economy than when it's at 35%. Now, do I want them at 75, 80, 90%? I don't. I think that's too high, even if it gives you great results. As a matter of fairness, I think it's too high. But should it be at 35%? Well, the numbers are in. Obviously, you shouldn't. That is too low. It does not help the economy. Let's go to another clip where he continues to say the exact right things.
I might feel differently if we were still in surplus. But we've got these huge deficits, and everybody agrees that we need to do something about these deficits and these debts. So the money we're spending on these tax cuts for the wealthy is a major driver of our deficit, a major contributor to our deficit, costing us $1 trillion over the next decade. By the way, these tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans are also the tax cuts that are least likely to promote growth.
All right, hallelujah. Somebody finally saying, hey, you know what? These tax cuts for the wealthy also increase our debt. Now, how could the Republicans come around and pretend they care about deficits when they would add $1 trillion to the deficit just because they want to give their rich friends tax cuts? Hallelujah! Finally, Democrats making the most obvious points of all time, which they should have been pounding home for the last 10 years. But hey, I guess better late than never. I'll take it. Now, how about the nonsense small business owner talking point that you keep hearing from Republicans? Go get him, Mr. President.
We can already anticipate, we know what those who are opposed to letting the high-end tax cuts expire will say. They'll say that we can't tax job creators. And they'll try to explain how this would be bad for small businesses. Let me tell you, folks who create most new jobs in America are America's small business owners. And I've cut taxes for small business owners 18 times since I've been in office. The proposal I make today would extend these tax cuts for 97% of all small business owners in America. In other words, 97% of small businesses fall under the $250,000 threshold.
All right, so we're doing tax cuts for 98% of us. We're doing tax cuts for 97% of the small business owners that the Republicans claim to care about. So what are you still crying about? We're giving tax cuts to the actual engine of our economy, which is the middle class and small businesses. So when you pretend that you are for the job creators, you are lying. That is not true. What you want is tax cuts for the richest Americans who donate to the Republican Party. That does not help our economy. That hurts our economy and certainly hurts our debt and our deficit. So last point is actually my favorite point. Watch this.
We all say we agree that we should extend the tax cuts for 98% of the American people. Right? Everybody says that. The Republicans say they don't want to raise taxes on the middle class. I don't want to raise taxes on the middle class. So we should all agree to extend the tax cuts for the middle class. Let's agree to do what we agree on. Right?
Thank you. You see, this is, again, politics 101. You say you want the tax cuts for the middle class? I want it. Done. Do it today. He said, if you send it to me today, I'll sign it today. Send it to me next week, I'll sign it next week. It's great politics. Then you turn around and say, hey, wait a minute. You're holding the middle class tax cuts, which we all agree on, hostage? You're holding them hostage so that you can get your tax cuts for the rich? Oh, come on. How do you not win on that? That's an absolutely, positively winning strategy. It hits all the things that the American people care about. They want you to get along, right? They want you to pass the things you agree on. Well, here it is. You definitely agree on it. You should definitely pass it the very next day. And then number two, it leaves the Republicans holding the bag on helping the rich, which the country does not want. Over 70%, including a majority of Republicans, saying enough tax cuts for the richest people in America. We don't want that. That's effective politics, and that is about damn time. Now, let me also clarify, I don't believe the president. Okay, just to be absolutely clear on that.